Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's exclusive backer event for In Search of Darkness Part 3. I'm Andrew, and I'm joined by the gang from Creative EC. Let's go around the table and introduce ourselves. We'll start with the main man, Robin.
Hi, everyone. Really great to be here. Thank you.
And hey, it's David
Weiner. David Weiner, the writer-director of In Search of Darkness Part 3.
Fantastic. Rocco.
Hi, everyone. I am the associate producer of In Search of Darkness Part 3. My name is Rocco Thompson.
And of course, let's not forget the wonderful Carla.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to today. My name is Carla, and I am the co-producer of In Search of Darkness Part 3. And I'm happy and excited to be here with you all.
Okay, so thanks ever so much for joining us today. We're really excited about this opportunity to give you a bit of an update, give you a bit of an insight into what's happening with this production, and to make a couple, I suppose, one really significant announcement, which we get a lot of questions about over email and on social media, which is, what collector editions are you doing with In Search of Darkness Part 3? And I'm delighted to announce that we are doing 2 collector editions. We are doing a Corey Taylor collector edition, and we are doing an Elvira collector edition. Both those interviews have been filmed, and they went really, really well. We're really excited to share with you what we're doing, and there'll be some more updates about this nearer the time. But that's the big news. That's the collector edition announcement. And I also just want to say, how much fun In Search of Darkness Part 3 has been for us, because it's really been a project where our backer base, our community, have really shaped how we're doing it, the kind of films we're featuring, the talent that we've got on board, which is world class for Part 3. And I'm so excited about what we've got to share and to end this epic trilogy on a high. And I've got to say, we talk a lot about community-driven entertainment, but what we're doing with In Search of Darkness Part 3 with you, with our backers, we've never done it to this degree before, and it's really changed and shifted our focus. We've almost finished production. We've still got a few more interviews to do, and we've begun post-production. So I'm seeing a lot of the sequences coming through at the moment, and I'm just loving it. And it's, I'm so confident we're going to end this trilogy on a high, and I can't wait to share it with you. So I'm going to hand over to David Weiner, and I just want to say thanks so much for being here, for your interest, for your support. It's been amazing, and I feel very privileged to be here. So David, over to you.
I definitely want to add to what Robin has said about the fact that this is community driven, and the fact that you guys have vocalized all of the types of movies that you want to be in Search of Darkness Part 3. That really is amazing, and helps us. That helps me personally when I'm putting this together, because we've tailored this very specifically to the type of material that you guys want. And now that it's actually coming to fruition beyond just an outline, it's something where I'm like, this is going to be great, because I already have the confidence of knowing that this is the stuff that you guys want. So it makes it easy for me. So I could just focus on, I don't have to focus on whether or not you guys are going to care about a movie or not. I know you will. Or I know, since we're doing some real specific deep cuts, I'm like, this is going to be great, because I know there are going to be people who've never even seen or heard of these, but they're really going to be interested because collectively they really fit in the ultimate jigsaw puzzle of 80s horror. That's more, like we've been saying, the underbelly or the bottom shelf, a lot of straight to video stuff, lots of really eclectic stuff. But I was surprised at how much theatrical stuff still hasn't made the cut for In Search of Darkness Part 1 or Part 2. And so I'm so happy to be putting it in Search of Darkness Part 3. We have done the majority of the interviews, but we have some more. I want to send a lot of kudos to Rocco Thompson for shouldering a lot of this content to make sure it's happening. And it's not easy reaching out to a lot of these people who sometimes aren't doing interviews anymore and being able to secure them, having them want to come in and sit with us for an hour or two or more is incredibly rewarding, because these are the deep cuts. So these are the names where you're like, wow, you're doing this movie and you got that actor or director or writer or someone or effects person in relation to that movie. You guys are the only ones who are doing this, which is, it's rewarding knowing that we're doing that. So we have shot about 40 plus brand new interviews for this movie, compared to In Search of Darkness Part 2, where we had about 15 new faces and 23 new interviews because we were struggling with the challenges of COVID and a pandemic, and putting out a film where you couldn't go out of your house, yet we somehow managed to do it. In Search of Darkness Part 3 feels incredibly fresh because we have so many fresh faces and fresh interviews, and still counting. So that's super cool. And Robin had mentioned that we are already editing. So we're putting this stuff together. I'm scripting it. I'm working with Samuel Way, our editor, who's just knocked it out of the park for the last 2 In Search of Darkness movies. He's back and chomping at the bit after doing sci-fi to get back to horror and the visceral nature of horror, which is super fun. I want to mention, like 30 film segments have already been done and in the works. And I feel like we're really, really just knee deep in this already, and it's lots of fun stuff. I'm going to hand it over to Rocco for a little bit, just so Rocco, you could talk a little bit about the process that you've been experiencing, and then we'll come back and we're going to reveal a couple new titles for you.
Yeah, so I wanted to send my own kudos, or kudos, as Robin likes to say, to the backers, because this has been such a joy for me. Because, I'm the new guy around here. This is the first Creator VC project I have been on. I love In Search of Darkness Part 1 and Part 2. But the deep cuts and sort of like the off the wall titles are where my heart really lies. We all love The Shining. We all love The Thing. But there's nothing like discovering and sharing these weird films that, you feel like no one else in the world besides you knows about with other people. So like I said, big kudos to you, the backers, for making this so fun and coming up with such a list of strange and amazing titles for us to dive into. And that really feeds into also the interview process. It's been so amazing digging people up, finding these people who, did maybe 1 or 2 movies in the 80s that they aren't necessarily super proud of, but have realized there's a fan base out there, coming to them and being like, yeah, we really want to celebrate your work. We really want to talk about this strange movie that you thought no one was going to see, but because of the magic of the internet and documentaries like In Search of Darkness, there's building a whole community that loves these films. So yeah, it's been a really interesting experience. I had some background doing interviews with Rue Morgue magazine and other journalism, things like that. But this has been my first time doing on-camera interviews, and it's been quite a marathon. The most recent one we did was 3.5 hours. Sometimes you get somebody in the seat and you only have them for an hour and you try and bang it out and get as much good stuff as you can. Other times you have talent who just wants to talk and talk and talk. And you almost have to pause it yourself because you're tired as the interviewer, but it feels like they could keep going.
I'd like to interject real quick that some of the talent that we've had, they have been so excited that they're like, well, give me the list of what you're going to be doing and I will do my homework. And that particular individual you're talking about, Rocco, had copious notes.
Yes. She had an insane amount of notes. And we only got through a handful of titles and there were more she wanted to talk about. She's kind of a famous face that we're excited to share with you all once it gets down to it. So we're going to hold that one close to our chest still. But that's been one of the magical things about this too, is, talking movies that these people weren't in, that they're fond of. We had Caroline Williams and Kelly Maroney back, who are 2 80s icons who are super into the genre as well. And to give them a list of the titles that you guys chose and have them pick their favorites from the list and discuss them effusively is such a pleasure. It's just, talking movie love with people who were there when it was happening. So it's pretty cool.
I'd like to take this opportunity to reveal a couple new titles, a pair of new titles that we're going to be doing. It's real important that you guys have an understanding of some of the titles that we're doing, but I really don't want to reveal all this stuff ahead of time. And I'm sure you guys want plenty of surprises too. Part of the magic and part of the fun of these In Search of Darkness movies are going through that wall of posters or perceived VHS boxes, and which one are you going to end on? And I know for part one, we did a lot of the heavy hitters, and I'm sure some of these more obscure eclectic titles, you're like, oh, I see it, but you didn't land on it. Oh, maybe you'll do it on two. Oh, I see it, but you didn't land on it. Oh, well, maybe if there's ever a part three, which we never expected to do, you'll get to it then. So there's more of that there. But I did want to sort of say, as a special treat, here's two more titles for you guys. So the first title that I'm going to reveal is a film that's close to my heart, in that I always wanted to see it, but I was a little young when it came out, and I saw it in newspapers. And on the heels of Jaws, I was like, wait a minute, this is something that takes place by the water on the beach, but you can't get to the water because the beach is going to get you. So this one's called Blood Beach. Raise your hands, even though I can't see you, who here has seen or at least heard of Blood Beach? This is a movie that you can't even get on DVD anymore. This hasn't made the leap. So when Phil Noble talks about the digital divide, this is a perfect example of a movie that is very hard to get now. But Blood Beach is super fun and it's super silly. And we have a specific crew member who was a pertinent member of this movie who has some great behind the scenes tales. The next one is a theatrical release from George Romero that most people don't associate with George Romero when they talk about his 80s output or his 70s output, and that's Monkey Shines. And all I'll say is that we have a specific cast member who is in this film who has some amazing tales, and I'm going to keep it at that.
We couldn't get through the Capuchin. Sorry, guys.
Right, we tried. That monkey's that monkey's agent was a tough cookie. Is all I could say. I'm also going to go. We had revealed previously in our last backer event exclusively a bunch of titles. I'm going to revisit those titles, and I'm going to mention a couple of the talent that we have got on board already talking about this movie among other movies specifically. And the first one I'm going to announce is Puppet Master. We talked about that we were going to be covering Puppet Master. I wanted to let you guys know that we have writer-director David Schmoller. We sat down with him to talk about everything Puppet Master, all things Charlie Band. And you can't talk about all things Charlie Band and all things 80s and straight to video and the VHS revolution without Charlie Band himself. So we also have Charlie Band in this movie, and I'm happy that I got to sit down with him because he was my first job when I worked out in Los Angeles. My first job ever was working for Full Moon Entertainment. So I got to reunite with Charlie, and he said, "You're who again?" So it was great.
And another work. That guy's slippery. So you're all very lucky you get to hear from Charlie Band.
Yeah, he's super busy. He's busy like half the time in Cleveland filming episodes of Baby Oopsies. So it's very hard to pin him down. The next film that we mentioned earlier was Blood Rage, and we have actor Mark Soper, who played not one but two characters, right? Twins?
Terry and Todd.
There you go. In Blood Rage. I won't say anything more about the plot of these things. Now, speaking of twins, this isn't really twins, but it's kind of a brother-sister duo, and it also has the 1 and the 2 next to each other. It's a sequel. We talked about Fright Night Part 2. Wanted to let you know that talking about Fright Night 2 among the cast, we have William Ragsdale and Jerry Dandridge's sister herself, Julie Carmen. And she was, they were both, but she was very jazzed to be talking about this movie that she got to be part of. Two more out of the gate. Terror Vision, another sort of Charlie Band special. We have writer-director Ted Nicolau talking about that experience. I believe he did a watch party with us.
He did, and he was a
Yes.
wonderful man, wonderful to speak to. A lot of fun, absolutely explaining how crazy TerrorVision was, and he was a joy to have.
Yeah, exactly. And he's a staple of the Full Moon family. Most of his work with Full Moon is the 90s are packed with everything, you know, subspecies and so on and so forth. And last but not least, you know, we're releasing, you know, In Search of Darkness Part 3. We're going to have a big campaign in October, and that's around Halloween. So we are doing Trick or Treat, and we brought in the Ragman himself, Mark Price, to talk about Trick or Treat. And of course, you can't have Trick or Treat without the DJ in Trick or Treat, some guy named Gene Simmons. I don't know. He was in a band in the 70s. I don't know if you guys have heard of him. But I'm super proud of the cast we're assembling for In Search of Darkness Part 3. It's really fun. I just finished In Search of Tomorrow. We all did, working together on this, but that's sci-fi. And after doing that, it's kind of nice to have a palate cleanser and go back to a genre where we all got our start. And Creator VC really, you know, we cut our teeth on the In Search of Darkness movies, and we're just so happy to be doing a Part 3. So thank you, everybody, for your continued support.
There we go. So onwards to our next section. That's pretty impressive, David. I mean, it's got to be such a joy for you and Rocco to be speaking to all these heroes, icons, legends of your youth.
Yes. And I think it's also, you know, as they're getting older, I think it's so important to capture them on film and to have these interviews and to have this, you know, time capsule of their work and what they did for the 80s horror genre. So, yes.
Very much so. It's not something to be taken for granted. And some of these people haven't been, you know, back in the spotlight in quite some time. And I think part of the fun, and I'm sure you agree with this, Rocco, is when we have to tell them that they are loved by a whole. Mark Soper, for example, you know, you've kind of had to explain to Mark Soper why we all love Blood Rage, because he doesn't fully understand the magnitude of why we would love that so much.
I think even after discussing it with me, he still doesn't understand. But I tried my best to you know, tell him. And you know, it was a lovely interview. It is funny though, just because a lot of these people are like, why they're baffled as to why you want to talk to them. But then some of them, like Julie Carmen, she loves Fright Night Part 2. She was so proud of her work in that. She treats it. I mean, she's worked with Cassavetes. She's worked with Robert Redford. She's worked with all the greats, really. But yeah, this horror sequel that kind of was a dud upon release and is sort of hard to find on this. Like, a lot of people have not seen it. She's just as proud of her work in that as she is in anything else, which is also really special. So you just never really know what you're going to get with these actors. And that's also what's sort of exciting about it, you know? Yeah.
Is it okay to say this? But we're getting a few people on the YouTube chat just saying how happy and excited they are to be a backer of In Search of Darkness 3. Like, it's amazing to hear that kind of feedback because often, although we're pretty active on social media, we've got some, you know, very good accounts. You know, it's sometimes you feel like you're working in a bit of a silo. So these opportunities to sort of hang out and answer questions and interact are really golden. They really boost the team. Because you know, the whole team, not just Rocco and David, are working really hard to get this out. These are hard, long, challenging projects to get together and to deliver. And your feedback and good wishes and just vibes really energize us. So thank you so much. I think Resolute Blood on on YouTube. Thank you. You know, that it's meaningful for us when we get positive vibes like that. Thank you.
We care that you guys care, and it's very true. You know, when you work on these projects, you really are in a bit of a vacuum, and just having your encouragement and your support and your occasional, hey, have you done this yet, or you should do this, or I'd love to see that. It really does make a difference. We do pay attention. And as I said earlier, we're making a movie by the fans for the fans. We are really making this movie for you guys, because we never believed we were going to be making a part 3. And so I'm more than proud to be able to include so much of the stuff that you guys want. Essentially, all of it is yours. I might have a couple favorites of myself, but you guys have already flagged them on the list. So just on
the questions front, because I can see stuff's coming in live, and I'm not treading on your toes.
That's all right.
I'm seeing the same questions. So the 2 questions that are coming up a lot are I've missed October's opportunity to back the project. Don't worry, you'll get another opportunity in October to back the project. You'll just miss out on all the kind of community stuff, but you're here, so it's great to have you. If you want to ensure you don't miss it, go to 80shorrordoc.com and put your email in the wait list. And once we go live again with another campaign, we will let you know. The other question I keep getting, and if you're asking this question, you're not alone, because we get it a lot, is when will it be delivered? Okay, so the film itself will be ready probably around October time, and October is when we're running our final campaign. So it's your last opportunity to get it, basically. And then the delivery, because once we sort of finish that campaign, it's all the kind of manufacturing and Blu-ray and DVD authoring, and that's going to take a bit of time, especially with the collector editions. And did I say box set, trilogy box set? Maybe I
have not said that.
I don't know if I should say that or not, but basically, yeah. So all of that will happen. So our expectation is that we'll be delivering. People will have their copy in December. It will certainly be shipped in December. So hopefully that should give you, a guide, an expectation of when to get this. But we're all on track for where we are, which I'm very happy with.
Okay, just before we get into the proper questions, there's 2 things I want to just cover off before we get into any further from questions we had on the chat. Well, first off is a statement. When we take questions, we unfortunately will not be answering, is that film in Search of Darkness 3, as David pointed out earlier. We don't want to reveal all the secrets to you, so we don't answer that. But there was one question, I think we can probably cover this off. It was from Joey Andrews. Will In Search of Darkness Part 3 include segments on Alien and Predator? Which is very good to say no, but there is a film that's recently come out that has substantial segments on them.
Yeah, it's good. We because we knew we were doing In Search of Tomorrow, we kind of divided up sci-fi and kept it separate. Now there's a big argument. Something like Aliens crosses action, horror, sci-fi, but we felt that particular film fitted more within In Search of Tomorrow. Oh man, I'm not going to tell everybody what I've got in my head, right? Because I'm going to spoil the surprise, but stay tuned to Twitter or Instagram Tuesday for a big announcement. I'm not going to say any more, but I'm really excited about it.
I will step in and say, for those who love Alien and Predator, or Aliens and Predator, in the 80s, there were many movies that either predated those movies or were very much inspired by or arguably ripped off those movies. And we are going to tip our hat with a couple titles that put their toe or a deep dive in the deep end of the pool, drafting off of those movies. So you'll still get that vibe, but you won't get the specific Aliens or Predator movie.
Andrew, you muted? Are you back?
Am I on mute?
No, you're on mute. We can hear you. We can hear
there
you.
You go.
Yeah.
I was talking very quietly.
Okay. What's happening next? So we're going to do a bit of an update, and then we're going to jump into the Q&As. So if you've got questions, please ask them. We're going to try and get through as many as possible, and we'll keep it rolling. Hopefully the questions we do answer will prompt new questions. So this is a bit that I like the most, where we just sort of chat and hang out. And I will only not answer questions that are really hard.
Yep.
So I'd like
So-
easy questions.
We've got two sets of questions. We've got questions on, we've got some pre-filled in questions Carla's going to be asking, and I'll be asking the questions from Discord and YouTube. So please ask away and I will go through them and we'll do our best to answer them for you. So Carla, over to you.
Okay, so first question I have here is from Matthew Robinson, who asked, what lessons have you learned from the first two installments that you will bring to this edition?
Who's that question for, Carla?
I would say David.
Unless you could, anyone could chime in with
Mhm.
my answer if you're not pleased with my answer. But we've learned quite a bit over this journey. And I think if I've learned anything is that, especially with the first film, where I made a very, very difficult decision to focus on North American films or English speaking films specifically. And a lot of people were not pleased that there was a whole world out there of horror in the 80s. In Search of Darkness Part 2 really gave us an opportunity to spread out and do more. You know, when you're doing a 4+ hour film, it's very unwieldy in terms of how much you can cover, but there has to be a bit of a focus. So now that we're on to In Search of Darkness Part 3, I think I've learned, if anything, that the international films really have a place in everybody's heart and deserve attention. And we need to really mix it up. We need to mix it up in terms of our contributors and the perspectives of the contributors, whether they're the experts or from the films themselves. But I've learned that you guys are paying attention to this very much so, and there's lots of why not this. We can never get to everything that everybody wants because there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of movies that came out in the 80s.
Right.
But by now, I think we've got our focus down very specifically that is going to reflect what you guys want the most in terms of our communication back and forth. So I don't know if that's something I've learned as much as something that we are intent to respond to and ingratiate in terms of how this movie is being made. But compared to the last two films, which again, I've been saying things are done in a vacuum, this is the first film where I really feel absolute confidence that I could do all sorts of weird, eclectic, fun, ridiculous titles and know that you guys will absolutely appreciate it, especially if we're not focused only on one particular country.
Nice. And I think a follow-up question to that is from Andrew Holland. And he says, barring the movies, and I love Part 1 and Part 2, what's going to be different with Part 3?
We have a structure that we really have come to love and respect and use as sort of our Bible. It's something that we found really, really works to really cover a broad spectrum of films. So we're going back once again, because if it's not broke, we're not going to fix it. So last time around, between In Search of Darkness Part 1 and Part 2, one of the new things that I added was people talking about themselves in their own individual segment in between the years of movies. That got a very, very positive response. So I want to continue on doing more of that this time around as well. You know, especially that's sort of the catch-all when you can finally get someone in your movie, in your documentary, where we already did their movie in the past, but we want to welcome this person into the fold, but we don't want to redo a movie, for example. So that being said, it's a way of sort of doing a career retrospective and being able to talk about these movies again from the point of view of the, you know, the actor or the writer or the director or, you know, special effects person, whoever it may be. I am doing something new this time around that I'm not going to talk about, that I think everyone will be responding to. We're essentially doing things the same way, same structure, but I'm going to I have a couple more tricks up my sleeve is all I could say.
Just about the format, I think that the format's really quite well established for our audience. And what we want to do is bring back that familiarity. I feel like the environment that's presented with an In Search of Darkness between 1 and 2 and now 3 has a continuity. And ultimately, what we're trying to deliver is something which is like a big, warm 80s horror hug, like nostalgia, warm familiarity, that kind of thing, where people can just, we get messages from people saying, I just have it on the back. I have it on in the background all the time. I just like having it on. And so I didn't, we don't want to do anything to it which will, change the identity of what this is, what this format is and how it works, especially with 80s horror. But from my perspective, what In Search of Darkness 3 is going to be so much fun. Not that the others weren't fun, but the movies we're covering are so much fun. Like you have to look at them and appreciate them from a certain perspective. And I think that is, I'm quietly confident this will be the most entertaining one out of the three. And certainly this is the only one we've gone out to our audience and said, hey, what do you want us to cover? What have we missed that really is meaningful to you? And that's super cool. So this is, we as a team, we've come together, we've got into a really good rhythm and groove. And we get to, with each project we do, we get to improve. And that's what I think In Search of Darkness 3 will demonstrate.
I also want to add on top of that, this structure, although it's a very long film each and every time, it's a lot of labor, it's a lot of work, but it does allow, because it's a formula to a certain degree that you guys have validated and love, it allows us to turn this stuff around faster than another film that strays from the path. That's entirely different. That's time consuming mentally and physically with your hands to actually make these things radically different. And we're not opposed to straying in new territory, but a radically different approach is a time consuming thing. And it wouldn't fit with part 1 and part 2. This is part 3. You want to be able to put all these 3 together and all be coherent and consistent. And that's what we're after.
I also wanted to add something because David was sort of alluding to this with the international titles. We definitely got some questions last backer event prior to this one that was pre-production about the question of diversity of opinion, diversity of gender, diversity of, just the faces on screen. And the nice thing about In Search of Darkness is that since our cultural cachet has sort of grown, and now we're able to dive into these stranger, more off the radar films, we're able to bring in more, diverse voices, diverse contributors. And that's sort of been my sort of drum that I've been banging since I've gotten here and joined the team. I'm constantly harassing. David's really great about this. He's like on my side about this, but I'm constantly harassing the team. We can have less white guys in baseball caps. We love white guys in baseball caps. You're lovely. But the nice thing is that, as I said, I think we've done a really good job, especially since that previous backer event, of making sure that we bring in more POC voices, examine films from different cultures that we were not able to get to before. LGBTQ contributors, all those things are very important to us. And we see that there is a group in our backers and in our contributors, in our backers and fans that want to see themselves represented a little bit more in Search of Darkness and in what In Search of Darkness is. So I just want everyone to know that that's different as well. Everything's really grown in that way.
Yeah, and I think that's great because, and it is not something that is not a quota. It doesn't feel forced because this genre of horror is an entry point for so many people, because you can kind of do whatever you want to do when it comes to horror, right? And set your own rules, and you can have low budget horror and it can blow up and be huge. And so I think just whether, gender, culture, it's just such a great entry point for people to get into this genre. And so to have that representation in Search of Darkness 3, I think it's going to be great. I think it's going to be fun. And it's just another list of films to add to your watch list, and check those off. So thank you.
We love that.
I'm growing tent.
Yes.
I'm looking at all the questions coming in.
I wanted to get into some of the questions from some of our amazing YouTube and Discord members.
There was one that I wanted to answer, which just came up, which is about 70s and 90s horror.
Yeah,
right?
let's go. That's once been asked on both sides from a few people. So Robin, to you.
All right. So look, this is our goal. I would love to cover 1970s. I know that David and I have talked about the 70s at length. There's so much amazing stuff to explore, and so much stuff that you know, and so much you don't know, right? And exploring it from where we are now today would just be wild. And I think David would absolutely adore that opportunity. That is on the roadmap. However, the next In Search of Darkness that happens will be 90s. And we want that journey to begin in October 2023, right? Because we've still got to deliver a few things. We've got some new stuff coming out as well. And also just want to give, this final release for, In Search of Darkness 1980s is a really big deal for us in October. And there's such big projects. We need to have a bit of a gap before beginning 90s. And 90s poses a lot of different challenges because it's a very different aesthetic to 80s, different themes, different way of making movies. It's the advent of CGI, love it or loathe it. But there's gold in that era, and it will feel so different, as will 70s will feel so different. I think one of the things we got right early doors with In Search of Darkness is we kind of nailed the aesthetic. Like, it felt like this is the definitive 80s, retrospective on horror. And I can't point to anything that could surpass that. That takes a lot of time, planning, research, and artistry to nail that. And I want to nail that authentically for 90s. And that's why we need a bit of a break. We can't just roll straight into it. But just the 70s is just crazy. So, we're not in a rush. Inspiration is perishable. And I remember working on the first In Search of Darkness and just being like amazed at the response, and it was just this wave that carried the whole project through. And I want to experience that again with 90s. I want to ride a whole new wave.
That's wonderful. So we've got a couple of questions from our YouTube community here. We've got one from our friend, great community member, Resolute Blood, who's really been a great supporter of us. He's saying, two things from him. First off, what about special T-shirts for backers, as well as special editions for In Search of Darkness Part 3? We've also got someone else saying, how can we upgrade to special editions? And also Resolute Blood is asking, can we get a DVD or Blu-ray just of all the trailers for the projects?
Okay, so regarding the trailers, no. Secondly, how can you upgrade? It will be in October, because we're not going to do anything to the website before then. And what was the other question?
Will there be cool T-shirts for backers and stuff like that?
Right. It's been a while since I looked at the 80s horror doc page. I can't remember if we included T-shirts as part of the backer awards for In Search of Darkness. If we did back in October, then it's likely we'll repeat it for this final October. If we didn't, the chances are we'll upgrade our merch store, so you can get that in the future. T-shirts are amazing, but from a kind of logistics rewards perspective, they're kind of quite challenging because they're heavy. One of the big things that we get hit with, because we on the whole include shipping fees into the price, is that the shipping fees have really increased post-COVID. And so believe it or not, a T-shirt will tip what bracket we're in, because we package up everything together with the posters. So hopefully that's answered your question. But basically everything will be revealed October 6th with our updated website, and that will give everyone an opportunity to upgrade and all of that good stuff.
Okay, and that's a question I think more for David, actually, from our communities, from Sharon and a couple of people. They'd love to see some bloopers from the recordings. Would that ever be possible, or are some of the talent a bit too precious potentially?
I think talent has a sense of humor about themselves, but there aren't too many bloopers. Usually bloopers are things that they say don't print that. Because it's really a conversation, and people don't stumble over lines that are coming out of their brain that when they're just talking as much as trying to remember lines and then screwing up the lines. So the dynamic of bloopers really isn't as robust as you might think for a project like this. I think it's a great idea because I think everyone who we have interviewed over the course of 3 movies now, all are just fun and they're having a good time, and they make jokes and sometimes at their own expense in terms of some of their projects or their career. It's all fun, but maybe it's a little bit precious. So I'm not sure if we're going to be seeing that anytime soon.
And equally, David, we missed the boat. We missed the boat on interviewing Dom DeLuise and Burt Reynolds together for a documentary, didn't we?
We can make a blooper reel entirely of Lloyd Kaufman.
Yes. Oh, that's a good one. Yes, that's a good one. And his COVID helmet that he wore, that he insisted that we make sure that he does his promo in his COVID helmet before we started his interview.
Oh, it's crazy. Absolutely crazy. Carla, have you got any questions on your list you'd like to ask?
Well, let's see. A lot of these we've covered. Someone asked specifically about the percentage of films covered in part 3 that was not in part 1 or 2. David, I think you at the top of the hour did kind of address this, but
I could revisit that real quick. The percentage of films that are in Search of Darkness 3 that were not in Search of Darkness part 1 and part 2 is next to 100%. This is all new stuff. Every single movie, every single year is brand new. Sometimes there are going to be references to other movies that we have covered already where someone makes an aside, in Hellraiser this and Critters that, or Critters 2 that, or whatever it may be. But in terms of brand new movies covered, there will be no repeats at all. This is, like I said, there are hundreds that came out in the decade. And I'm even finding now as I'm putting our definitive list of films that we're covering together that there's still going to be plenty that just aren't going to make the cut. And, we'll have a poster, we'll have an aside, or it's just not going to make the cut. And if anything, it's just inspiration for everyone to go explore and find more for themselves, because we'll never be able to get them all.
Exactly. And, I have a follow-up question for that. Since I'm a fan, this question comes from me. Have you found there to be a difference in how you talk about the films, dissect the films, and straight to video films versus theatrical releases?
Theatrical versus straight to video, I think sometimes it's relevant to talk about how they were distributed and why they were distributed one way versus another. But sometimes that's just the balance in between the importance of focusing on some behind the scenes anecdotes or some reaction to the film itself. So sometimes it's pertinent and it's included, sometimes it's not, and I'm not going to draw attention to it. My approach, I've had to switch gears from the thought process of scripting In Search of Darkness 3 back from a change I needed to make for In Search of Tomorrow, talking about sci-fi and presenting sci-fi and the way we presented all those movie segments. It's more of a intellectual as well as emotional and nostalgic, versus horror is a little more kinetic and a little more reactive. There's information and there's factoids and there's material that can and should be included, but it feels different. And if anything, I gotta edit myself a little more because the segments can run a little longer now, and I got to keep them shorter. So
it's crazy you mentioned that. Like it's something that I took for granted, jumping from In Search of Darkness to In Search of Tomorrow. In Search of Tomorrow, we couldn't cover as many movies because the movies had almost too much complexity. So you couldn't do them justice in the same way you can do horror justice. You can focus on very specific elements in horror and make it feel as if it's a very entertaining look back, and you can sort of get the gist of it, get the vibe, and get that hit. Whereas with sci-fi, it was much more it was a lot more difficult because our audience knows a lot of these movies, especially the big ones, and because they've got so much going through them all at the same time, it became a real challenge. One that I think David totally aced, by the way, But for me personally, it's really nice to revisit horror. I've had a question from Joey Andrews about, will we talk about any shot on video movies? And I think, David, you're the right person to ask there.
Yeah, there are a couple winners that were shot on video and released straight on video. And that's part of this big horror gumbo that we've got going. So yeah, I don't want to reveal titles, but we got a little show and tell coming, it looks like.
Yep.
This is a really good book. If anyone's into shot on video horror films, this is like research. I got this off Amazon. Like, this is a good book if you're into it. It's quite weighty.
Analog nightmares.
Something I just wanted to say also that makes In Search of Darkness Part 3 so unique, and what I've really enjoyed about the interviews is, we already covered all the accepted classics, the ones that everyone loves. So what's really cool about these films is a lot of these films have a lot of problems and, are really rough around the edges, but it's so fun to talk about what is good about these films, examine, maybe why, for example, Monkey Shines doesn't work, but also looking at why it's really good still and why it's worth seeing and worth seeking out. So there's a really cool critical examination of these films at the same time that we're celebrating them.
I think if there's a consistent theme that I'll just sort of allude to is that there's a lot of struggle to get a project over the line, especially in the 80s when you had no money. Even if you had no money and it's clear with the final product that there was very little budget, there's lots of creativity, there's lots of inventiveness, and it's still a struggle to get it released. And sometimes video was the only way to do it and sell it by entertaining box art, or a really good trailer. And that's very consistent with that era. And that's what a spotlight on In Search of Darkness Part 3 is going to be.
Well,
David, a question.
Go on, Robin.
I was just about to jump in. All right, Resolute Blood. This is a really good question. What about putting fan tattoos in ISOD 3? David, put you on the spot.
Fan tattoos, eh? That's a fun idea. We did a thing on fandom, and I'll give you this. Nick Castle told a really fun story about how he was at a convention and he signed somebody's arm, and then an hour later they came back and it was a tattoo. And he sees it all the time, how devoted everybody is to have their favorite horror characters or moments, permanently attached to their makeup. And it's very much part of the horror culture, and we all know that. And I think that's a cool idea.
I say we only include them if they're ISOD branded tattoos.
I wonder if anyone has ever had an In Search of Darkness tattoo.
Somebody has. They have
right.
to.
Like, if
tattoo
you
of
get an In
Robin-
Search of Darkness tattoo,
I have a
right?
tattoo of Robin Block on my arm. But
If
it's
you
still
can
little
get
sore.
a Robin Block production and the In Search of Darkness tattoo, I will ensure it makes it into In Search of Darkness 3. I'm just gonna put it.
Oh, wow.
That'll be an executive.
Okay. So a question I was going to ask, and it's actually from a bit of a joke someone made, Onzi, our friend, made in the Discord, saying In Search of Darkness 3, the Weiner cut. But I think this opens up a wider question, possibly to David and to Robin, because I know there's some interesting stuff around the productions of our movies, around how much of the cut, I mean, and this goes into the wider organization as to how Creative VC works, the flatness of it, the freedom David has to say to Robin, we need to spend a lot more money to make this film a bit longer because it needs to be that reason for whatever. And that was a thing that really happened. It's not a traditional studio whereby we say, right, this movie's got to be 90 minutes because we need to get a different set of butts on the seats every 2 hours. So if you could speak about, about the creative direction, because
I mean, what we've got with In Search of Darkness is an established format. And I was so lucky and fortunate to meet David at the beginning and have someone who not just realized what I wanted to happen, but brought so much to it, right? And I was delighted with the journey we all went on with In Search of Darkness. It was something absolutely wonderful. I'm looking up on my wall, and I've got like a framed picture of the Hollywood premiere at Beyond Fest, and I remember sitting down to David next to him, like absolutely with major imposter syndrome. There was 600 people in the cinema going to David, I haven't seen this final cut yet, because as an executive producer, you get so close to stuff that, but you can end up getting in the way of yourself. So, you know, Creative VC is a really small team that over delivers. Like, I think people expect, quite rightly, so much of us, but we're a very small virtual team like that from around the world that comes together. And you've got to have really, you know, huge amounts of trust in everybody, and everyone's going to have that trust in you as well for this to work. You know, as much as I love In Search of Darkness and the journey of making that happen, In Search of Darkness 2 is my favorite. And honestly, apart from marketing it and raising the money and sort of doing the business and legal stuff, I wasn't really involved. And I watched a very late edit of it, you know. And the thing is, the way David works with Sam is I can watch sequences as they come in, and I don't feel the need to put have my sort of head over David's shoulder. It's not going to help anything. And the story that you alluded to there, Andrew, about In Search of Tomorrow, was as someone who's got ultimate responsibility for the business, there are certain parameters that I've got to stick within. And sometimes you come into conflict between what people want and what we can actually deliver, and for it to make sense for everybody. And I was really very wary of going into like a crazy running time for In Search of Tomorrow, because there's limits to what you can do with Blu-rays. There's just limits for audience attention, all of that kind of stuff. And, you know, to be fair, I'd really sort of said that to David, these are the parameters. We can't exceed these parameters. And he had to make loads of cuts to In Search of Tomorrow to sort of please me. And then I watched the full cut of it, and I was like, we need to put it all back in, which is why, you know, and I couldn't believe, and I knew how much that was going to cost the business, and the, you know, the upgrading from BD25 to BD50, if you understand sort of Blu-ray stuff and all of that kind of stuff. So, but it was worth it. It was worth it because it needed it, because there's certain movies that you can't dance over. You have to give them just enough time to breathe. And that's, you know, that's exactly how it goes here. I mean, often, like right now, I'm working on a brand new format, which I don't think has ever been seen. I'm going to talk a lot more about it in the next few weeks, but I'm working with a new director on this. David's involved as an EP on this project, and it's like, I know what great looks like. Like, that's the bar. And the way Creative VC works is, you know, we meet every week on a Wednesday, and we call it an all hands meeting. We just chew the fat. We talk about what we want to do, what we're looking at. Like at the moment, we're looking at developing an email newsletter, which Rocco and Carla are working on, which I'm really excited about. Not like a marketing one, but a one that is content based, right? Which we'll start to talk about more in the future. And we'll bash around ideas. And, you know, often there's this phrase, strong opinions loosely held. Often I will start off at the beginning with a really fixed idea of what I want. And by the end of a discussion, I've completely changed my idea, because there's so much brilliance in this team. And you know, I think all of us, it's very important to me that we have a flat structure. So everyone in this team has a voice that is listened to, and I don't think, well, I can tell you we would not be successful without that. And so I think that's the kind of difference. And, you know, even Rocco joining us last year, you know, it was so important for us to find someone who could sort of contribute to the culture we have. And it's, you know, it's a real privilege to do this work. You know, I don't feel like I'm running anything. I feel like I'm catching up half the time. So that's kind of the way I look at it.
You're looking for a David Weiner cut. They're all about an hour to an hour and a half longer than what you ultimately get. And sometimes we're lucky enough to carry it over, and sometimes we're not. But I'm always happy with my longer cuts, and I always know that no one's going to get to see them except us.
You know what, right? Like we bound. I mean, I just had another question. Will we do a 2000s like horror documentary? I would love to cover like from 60s and 2000s, and eventually from 2010s to 2020s, right? So have In Search of Darkness be the horror retrospective vehicle, but you're looking years in the future, and there's so many unknown factors. You know, like you with these projects, you've got to be motivated. You've got to really, because they're so difficult, and that and I call it intrinsic motivation to work on projects that you really care about. That's a finite resource, and they're so hard. And we're just coming off the back of In Search of Tomorrow, which was done, you know, although it's like, you know, hugely successful, highest grossing crowdfunded documentary ever, right? It was exhausting. We had to go through COVID, which really elongated everything. And you know, I do believe there's a limit to what you can do in terms of work which is really inspiring for you. And so that's why we're having a bit of a break between In Search of Darkness 3 and doing 90s, because we want to get back into that zone of being like, I cannot wait to make this happen. You know,
the true horror though is that we're at the point where we can even begin talking about a 2000s retrospective.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, exactly.
I would love to roll it out, you know, and cover everything. But you know, there's it's crazy. Even the watch parties we do every week, which, you know, Andrew just, you know, should get all the praise. Carla, Dom, like these are like, they're there every week because they want to be, you know, it's sort of, we're very, very fortunate to be doing this work. You know, I never thought I'd be doing this. I never thought I'd be sort of hopping and skipping to work, getting to work on these projects and with people that I not only like immensely, but I respect. It's, you know, I don't expect anything to last forever, but this has been an absolute high point of my career, like without a doubt.
What's so interesting is that being a super fan of 80s horror, I wasn't even entertaining the idea of going beyond the 80s. I'm like, the 80s is all there is. Like, after the 80s, what's next? But because David and the team has done such a great job at looking at these films and really looking at the films, what was going on during the time, doing these different chapters and topics. Now I want to see David's take on the 90s. Now I'm like, okay, I'm going to go on this journey with you on the 90s. And I'm really curious to see what your take is going to be. And so for me, that's what I'm excited about, to be able to challenge my own biases when it comes to anything other than 80s horror, right? And to be open-minded enough to learn something new about horror in a different decade. So,
and that's why David and Robin have assembled such a great team, because, you know, for me, I keep saying, like, I'm a contrarian. Can't help it. I love the 90s. I love that 90s is like a dark age for horror, even though there's such great stuff in there. So, and I'm a little younger than the other folks.
Don't rub it in, Rocco. Don't, you know.
I'm sorry, but no, 90s and 2000s are very in my wheelhouse. Those are when I became a horror fan. I worship the 80s, I worship the 70s, I worship every decade. However, there's so much to explore in every decade. So if you guys are into 90s and 2000s, keep letting us know, keep banging on about it, and they may happen in the future.
Have we got any more questions?
Scream about it.
Well, I think we've got a good one from Joey Andrews over on YouTube here, because it's probably quite good for almost a final question of the day. Is part 3 the final chapter of 80s horror? Because 80s horror never dies.
All right. So this is a really great question, right? So I never thought we'd be doing part 3. And there's something about leaving something on a high. It's like your favorite TV show, like series, when they go on too long, you know, Game of Thrones, like, it's just when they go on a bit too long, it kind of, you know, and I want to, it's so important to all of us to end this on a high. However, there's so much more to explore with 80s that we couldn't possibly cover in even like 13 hours of 80s horror documentary goodness if you put it all together. So who knows how that would how that would work. When I sort of brainstorm, I kind of daydream about a season pass to a kind of online version where we could tackle the right super obscure stuff and the stuff, even the stuff that we missed with all three. But the reality is that quality, editorial quality, takes time, takes a lot of effort, and we're just fortunate enough to be in a position now where we've got a backer base that supports that. I'm a huge, massive YouTube hound, love YouTube. YouTube inspired a lot of what we're doing, actually. And so I think that we'd love to hand the mantle off to, all those amazing YouTube horror creators that review movies, do great jobs. I'm always discovering new channels. Gory Bits is a great one. But there's a lot of other ones that, are kind of sub 100,000 where they're starting to do some obscure stuff. So I feel like that, it will continue on, but it'll just not be us.
There we go. So I think that's the end of the questions today. It's been really great, really enjoyable. We're just getting ready because we're going off the air with this in a moment. We'll be back at 5:30 with today's watch party, which will be for Creepshow. And I believe, are you joining us today, Carla, for Creepshow?
Yes, I am.
Fantastic. Dom will be here and we're having a great time. So that's the one we're really looking forward to doing. That's a highly requested watch party. So we're covering it at last. But yeah, it's been really wonderful. So Robin, I think Robin, David and Rocco as our guests, will hand to you for the last few words of the day.
I just want to say thanks so much. It's just it's a dream come true for me getting to hang out on YouTube with backers of a project that we've put together, to work with who I'm working with, and I include all our backers in that. You're all stakeholders in what we're doing, and please join us for the watch party. I've never seen Creepshow, so this is a first time watch for me, please join us, and we'll see you again. When are we going to do this again? It'll be later in the year, won't it? It'll be sort of Q3. So I hope you can join us in a few months when we do this again, where we'll be in the depths of post-production. And thanks so much.
Okay, well, there we go then. So everybody stay safe. Hopefully we'll see you in about half an hour for Creepshow. If not, stay safe, look after each other, and we'll see you when we see you.
See you later, everyone.
Thanks,
Take
everybody.
care.
Thanks for coming today.